Welcome to Balls and Strikes, where we call 'em like we see 'em. I'm Gary Abernathy, former columnist for the Washington Post. Yes, that Washington Post, a rare conservative voice inside the Beltway. After years of watching Washington spend your money like a drunken sailor with a stolen credit card, I figured it was time to stop talking about it and start doing something about it. With me is Ken Buck, former U.S. Congressman from Colorado and founder of Americans for Good Government, who survived inside Congress long enough to have some real stories to tell. We're going to be discussing everything from DOGE, was it effective, to the governor of New York begging rich people to come back into the state so they can pay for their big socialist programs. It's amazing what's going on in the world of government finance. So Ken Buck, good to see you today. How are you doing?
Great, Gary. It's good to be with you.
You know, Ken, we heard a lot when President Trump first came into office about the DOGE project led by, at first, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and eventually just by Musk and his staff. And I think we can all agree, I know you do, that cutting government waste and reducing spending would be a wonderful thing. But let me just point something out. In a recent viral video of a deposition, a DOGE staffer, 28 years old, I'm going to read this, named Nate Kavanaugh, was asked directly, "Did you reduce the federal deficit?" And his answer was, "No, we didn't." DOGE's original goal was $2 trillion in cuts. Federal spending, get this, actually increased during the DOGE program. Ken, you spent a decade in Congress fighting wasteful spending. What does real, lasting government accountability reform actually require? Let me ask you, why is it so hard to build it?
I want to go back to something you said earlier when you were introducing this subject, Gary. What's fascinating to me is not everybody does agree that we should cut government. You and I agree, and most Americans, watching this, and most Americans agree, but the media doesn't agree. Every time they talked about this, and it's part of the answer to your question, every time the media talked about this, it was about how people were being, let go, and they would have to find new jobs, and they had families, and there was hardship, and there is hardship. There's no doubt about it. There was a kinder, gentler way to go through this process. But the reality is that the government spends too much money, and we don't have that money anymore. And so what does it take to get to where we want to be, a balanced budget or somewhere close to a balanced budget? It takes the will of the people. It's one of the reasons I started Americans for Good Government, because the people inside D.C. have no incentive to cut spending. DOGE was a great idea, and it turned into a three-ring circus. It was a political spectacle. It was not the kind of effort that we expect when we have a crisis, and that's what we have right now.
When we talk about how DOGE didn't really complete the mission in the way we think it did, was Elon Musk the right guy to run that? Was Elon's vision the right vision, or what got in the way to maybe not let it complete the mission the way it wanted to?
Well, Elon, in my view, is the perfect person. He's a business person. He understands profit and loss statements. He understands waste and how you can't survive with the kind of waste that was out there. And if you think about the sacrifice that Elon made, if every American makes just a fraction of that sacrifice, we could deal with this issue. But here's a guy who has a car company, Tesla, and people were burning these cars just because they were protesting. And what were they protesting? His attempts to make America stronger, his attempts to reduce the waste in federal government. And he was vilified for that. It's absolutely crazy that Americans didn't see him as a hero and see him as somebody who we want to emulate and somebody we want to promote in this effort.
Yeah, I agree. You know, as I looked at DOGE, and again, I thought this is a great idea. Why do you think it wasn't more effective than it could have been? Was it a one-size-fits-all approach? Maybe I thought to myself, they didn't do the kind of pre-planning they needed to do, because here you are willy-nilly going in and kind of cutting half the staff or more than that. What are your thoughts on what they should have done to make it work better?
When I started in Congress, we had caps on spending. We had spending caps, and those spending caps were really important because what it forced Congress to do, and it forced the administration to do, is we'll take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Since then, they've taken all of A and B, and they just keep spending all the money that they want. So spending caps are one way to accomplish the goal because your growth is going to exceed your budget. And so if the growth, the natural growth in government would exceed the budget. And so if you have to cut, hopefully agencies cut in the ways that are the most beneficial in the long run. Some agencies, some bureaucrats know this game very well. And so they cut in ways that hurt the public the most so that there's a public outcry so that they get more funding and they keep spending. This game has been going on in DC for 200 years. These are experts. Not all of them have been there all 200 years, but some of them probably have. And these are experts in how to get around budget caps and requirements to reduce spending.
And you're right. And then the media piles on because they don't want any changes and starts producing story after story, identifying kind of these random people. Oh, look how much it's hurting this person. Look at this. And that's to build the public sympathy for anyone being affected by cuts that they don't realize are just serving the purpose of making folks more dependent on government rather than teaching them how to be self-sufficient.
Right. And what's so sad, Gary, Ronald Reagan said the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a federal program because nobody cuts the federal programs. They grow at different rates, but nobody will walk in and say this is a state function. And that's one of the things we got from DOGE is the Department of Education shouldn't be in the federal government. It should be run by the states and local communities. And so hopefully that's one good side effect of DOGE is that the Department of Education goes back to the states and let them run the department and fund the Department of Education.
Yeah. My favorite Reaganism, of course, or the scariest words you'll ever hear are I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right?